Good evening, chocolate people. Welcome to the Chocolate Life. I am your host, Mr. Chocolate, and we have our resident co host with us, Coach K. And we have a good show for you tonight entitled Media, Messaging, and Manipulation. And we're going to cover a lot of good ground in this show.
Well, how are you, Mr. Chocolate, this evening?
I'm good. I'm good.
Well,
Um,
go ahead.
yeah, I'm good. Just I think I had a breakthrough in my little writer's block stuff, but did some research on some things for the show, and got some good information. Got some good information.
Cool. Uh, it's good when we can actually have some breakthroughs in our lives, so we can actually move to a higher dimension uh, in life. And we're gonna go on and get started. I want the audience just to know that we always appreciate them tuning in with us every week and finding that the information is helpful in every aspect of their lives. And um, once again, we say thank you guys for tuning in. And don't just tune in, use the information to empower yourselves and your community. That is the ultimate goal of this podcast, that we become advocates of people learning and passing the information on so others can learn uh, uh, likewise. Um, our title our title says media messaging and manipulation, and the way we're going to set this up this evening sound like Mr. Chocolate is putting some information in. I can hear some typing there. It comes through very loud and clear, crystal clear, matter of fact. But I want us just to look at those for a moment, because I think for us to actually understand how much we have been manipulated, we have to go back to um, the beginning of this concept we call media. And media has been used to manipulate the masses ever since the 15th century. And we're just going to highlight, because I want Mr. Chocolate to just go over all of these new forms of media, the kind that you guys are just prolific in using them. But at the same time, this media is allowing everybody to become more engaged, but at the same time, they're using it to just keep track of us. And then eventually, if we don't trust each other enough to do research, we become held hostage to the colonizers and the imperialist rulers all over again. And as I stated earlier, it was back in 1440, and that is when the invention of the printing press was done, and it was done by Johann Gutenberg. And by the name Gutenberg, if you don't know, that's a German name. Um, that's when it was an empire. This is not, when we say German. There was no German country back in the 15th century. Regardless of how we are taught to understand European history, there was no country called Germany at that point. Germany was a language, a group of people, just like the 54 different nations on the continent. That's the same thing that was happening in the part of Europe we call Germany, or Austrian Hungarian Empire. That's what it was a part of. But it was during the time that all of the fighting, Europeans are excellent at fighting, Europeans are excellent at killing. Europeans are excellent at destroying the earth. I'm just giving you facts. I'm really not giving them a compliment, because it's not a compliment when you look at the rest of the world as the subjects of yours, when these are the people who came out of, um, what do they call us that are third world countries? They call people from the continent third world countries. And that's not necessarily true, but if people want to believe that, then they will continue to uh, uh, promote that kind of mindset that these are developing countries. No, they got destroyed by European imperialists, and European imperialists have been attempting to recolonize them when they destroyed them, because Europeans are, as I stated earlier, they're excellent at destroying uh, land masses so they can go in and rebuild them, i.e., Black Rock. But that's something for the future. Right now, I'm trying to build you guys up to the current. Uh, that printing press, the first piece of propaganda it printed was what we call the Bible. Okay, and that's a European Bible, because the Bible is older than 1455 when the printing press put this information into a text form. But you have to go back and look at the older Bibles, and when the Bible was printed in AD 95 or 1400 BC. You have to go back and look that up to know the difference between what I'm saying right now, which is a printing press, versus being printed on papyrus and different kinds of other techniques of writing instruments. So, in the way that Europeans state history, that would be only true that there was no printing press before 1440. So therefore, the first thing they printed was a way to control the masses. How do you control the masses? You put information together. Mind you that most of these people cannot read. So think about this for a moment. Who are they printing these books for? They're printing them for the quote unquote elites of their day. The elites to actually disseminate information to people who can't read, and then they will disseminate it kind of like, if I can use a today person, they will do the same thing Christopher Rufo and Ron DeSantis is doing in Florida. They will decide how they want information to go, and they will print up information to say, this is how it is. Not that this is really how it is, but this is how they have put it together and how they want it to go. That's the reason why this information tonight is entitled Media, Messaging, and Manipulation, because they are expert, and they have done this for a very long time. So therefore, we're playing catch up. But it's okay to play catch up as long as you're catching up, so you can pass on this information to your communities so we can be free. That's the whole idea of this concept. How do we free ourselves from this mind manipulation? Because that's what is manipulated right now, our minds. Have been colonized, we have been indoctrinated. So therefore, our minds need to be free, and then we can move accordingly. The printing press, as I stated, 1455. Europeans are still fighting and killing each other. About the time 1500 roll around, and they have, not only they're killing each other, but they have what you call a little ice age. And I guess little in comparison with the ice age of 10,000 years earlier. This would be a little ice age, because it did not occupy the whole earth. It occupied most of Europe. So therefore, their citizenry was starving, and they were killing each other, and they needed a new way to have an income. So the printing press became a way for the people in the community of that part of Europe, which is Eastern Europe, uh, to have a way of having income. The Bible was really propaganda. It was. Regardless of what you've been told, that's what it was. And they put these manuscripts or ancient texts together so they can manipulate the citizenry in following their rules, because the Bible was also a weapon of military. It was a military weapon. Um, Europeans, colonizers, imperialists, however you want to frame it, they've used basic things that people need to survive as weapons, such as food, such as knowledge, such as freedom of speech. They've used all of that. Fast forward, when we come to the colony, as they have deemed it, as the colony for the colonizers, you still got that same framework. As a matter of fact, let me read this really quick from the colonizers who ran, who was what they called the governor. All of these title governors and those different things, they come from European language. Governors, senators, that framework comes straight out of Europe. And this is during 1671. There was no United States. They were still colonizers. But this is what the governor, his name was William Berkeley, said. And this is the 17th century. In other words, this is going into the 18th century, because 18th century, because we almost at 1700. This was in 1671. And he wrote, "I thank God there are no free schools, nor printing, and I have hope that we shall not have these 100 years later, for learning had brought disobedience and heresy and sex into the world, S-E-T-S, into the world, and printing has divulged them, and libel against the best government. God bless us from both. As a British government once told the governors of Massachusetts, great inconvenience may arise and liberty of the printing." So we can see what these people actually thought of media even at that time. And we're talking 1671. In 1690, there were one of the first, what you would call a printing, just printing paper. I want to call it, it wasn't really a publication at that time, because they were still tied under the British crown. So that's why I'm trying to be careful in the way I frame this. It was a publication. I'm not sure if it was printed in England or if it was printed in the colonies, which you call the Virginias or Boston. But it came out in a Boston publication, and it was called Occurrence of Both Foreign and Domestic. And you have to look at that. It's in the Research colonialwilliamsburg.org newsletter, and you can find this and you can see for yourself whether or not this is an actual newspaper. And if it is, you will see two gentlemen names listed there. One name is Harris, and the other one is, I'm looking for his name, because this is, one is Richard Pierce, the other one is Benjamin Harris. Benjamin Harris was running from the crown, okay? Because he made a statement against the crown, so therefore he was up against persecution. So as you see, the young people who are getting put out of school right now because they don't want to go along with the killing that the United States continue to endorse and fund. it still looked the same way because the mindset of Europeans, and I will have to keep saying European colonizers, it has not changed. They still have the same mindset that they had back in 1440. Okay, because as you can see, in the 1500 it had not changed when they did the printing of the text, and then in 1600 it had not changed when you have a person over here who is a colonizer, who is set up to be quote unquote the governor, and that is the governor so they can start occupying and ruling all of this land we now call the Americas, and to do away with anything the indigenous people were doing, to massacre them, to slaughter them, to do, to put them in what you now call reservation. This has been their goal the whole time. And from print media, we then come into what you call radio. And radio was the popular form of media in the 1920s up until 1940s when the TV became really popular in the homes. When the radio, and we have to kind of look at these kind of simultaneously, because in the meantime, even when you got the printed text or the radio, and also the invention of the TV, which is the 20s, the 30s, and 40s, the United States is still killing Black people. So I want us not to forget that, regardless of what the messaging is. The messaging was not telling the public that in 1919, the United States had what's known as a Red Summer, which marauders around the country destroyed Black communities. In 1921, the marauders destroyed what is known as the Greenwood District of Tulsa, Oklahoma. That was domestic terrorism. In 1923, marauders and very hateful, very poor, used to be slaves, white people in Sumter, South Carolina, I mean, not South Carolina, but Sumter, Florida, destroyed the town known as Rosewood. And all of these have certain dynamics that play out. You see hatefulness, you see the government not helping Black people, and you see where Black people still continue to try to figure out how do we manage while all of this is happening in this regime we call the United States. The United States have never been our friend. So what I'm trying to get us to kind of see is, regardless of what media we have now, the media still is not our friend. Now, if we can use it like we're doing right now, because we're on a platform that's called a podcast, if we can use it to actually garner support from each other on how to do more things offline, like getting to meet with each other in different parts of the world where we can educate and empower so people can learn how to challenge the government, because that's what we're up against. We're up against regimes who don't really respect regular people. People who look at themselves as being elites or entitled don't look at everybody else as deserving of the same value and rights in life. For instance, in 1916, and we're still talking about how things are messaging, okay? And this is a person that we have the fight is still going on right now. Margaret Sanger. For you guys who don't know Margaret Sanger started what is now known as Planned Parenthood. This woman and her ilk, because it wasn't just Margaret Sanger. Margaret Sanger was a part of what you call the Eugenics Society. when eugenics was just open information. It was a public discussion. And she started this project back in 1916. And when I say a project, because her project was to exterminate Black people, and she didn't have any problem saying that. She also stated that if she had any problems with people who wanted to run interference to the programming, she would talk to the preachers. One of the preachers that was on board with this was Adam Clayton Powell. Adam Clayton Powell was the pastor of Abyssinian Baptist Church in New York. This man was also a senator or congressman. But at the same time, he was doing the same thing that Al Sharpton and all the rest of these people are doing. Somehow, even in our own community, we had people who didn't think we were deserving of learning how to have autonomy over our own bodies. Yet and still, in 2024, somehow, since white men have told them, you got to have these babies because they've never been concerned about Black people. I just gave you the history of Margaret Sanger. Not only Margaret Sanger, but Margaret Sanger had this project going for 25 years, from 1916 until 1940, I think it was 42. But at the same time, there was the Tuskegee Institute experiment. That went on from 1932 to 1972. So you see how this information and the media have lied to us because of how they message things and how they manipulated even our so-called be um, holy men. Because at that point, there was really few, if not any, women who occupied pulpits. They were men. And these men were doing the same thing that everybody have a cow that the Republicans are doing. But this is what the United States have been doing for a very long time. And now we have this agenda that's going on now, where some of these people who are running for office are pretending once again that they are our friends, which they are not. But let's move on up because, as I stated, we're talking about media and messaging. The media back in 1925, which was mostly print, but you got radio. But you also have Adolf Hitler, who wrote a manifesto. Now, mind you, he wrote a manifesto, but his manifesto was how to indoctrinate people, okay? And he did an excellent job because he showed a group of people how one of the quotes, and this was one of his generals or whatever you want to call it. If you tell a big lie, and remember, Donald Trump talked about the big lie, okay? So all the language that people use now have been used earlier. In 1925, Adolf Hitler wrote a manifesto called Mein Kampf. Mein Kampf talked about how if you tell a lie, you tell it often enough, you tell it big enough, people will believe it. So he was talking about how to indoctrinate people, and people are still using Adolf Hitler's material to do what they're doing now, because people who major in hatred, that's a spiritual concept. There is no redeeming for that. So anybody who wants to try to help that group of people, go right ahead. But as we can see, 1925, this man wrote this book, and about the time 1939, he was putting this information into practice. And he was destroying the people that the white Jews of his time over in Germany. And not only the white Jews, but the poor Polish people, the poor what are these people? Gypsies, the poor who, as this lady Margaret Sanger called the infirm. In other words, they killed people that they thought were not worthy to live. So not only was this going on in the United States or vice versa in Germany, I want you guys to remember Germany got all of their practice from the United States. So I don't want you guys to miss that. Germany, Mein Kampf, Adolf Hitler, he learned all these practices from the eugenics society here in the United States. So we have to repackage the messaging because it has been used to manipulate the masses, okay? And I'm just talking about the masses in the United States have been walking in sleep. So yes, we all need to be awakened, regardless of how Europeans in America try to use the concept talking about anti-woke. So what they're saying is they want everybody to look like what the governor said back in 1671. But we're not having it. Because even after World War II, the United States and Russia, which became the Soviets, they began a new kind of fight, a fight where they don't exactly face each other head on, and they call it what is known as the Cold War. So, all fast forward to 30 years, we have another mean of communication that had not been introduced. And when I say not been introduced, because now we're talking about advanced technology. We've gone from print media, we've gone from the radio, we've actually gone from the TV. And now we're entering into a new arena. And what I want Mr. Chocolate to do is just give you guys a little bit of insight on the new media, which, in other words, it began what we're using now, which is called the internet. So, with that, I want him to just give you um, some of the background and however he see fit to give it to tell the audience. Hello?
Yes. All right. So, right now in new media, it's kind of like an offshoot of radio. Then, right now, leading the charge right now in the new media is podcasting. Podcasting actually started in the late 1990s, early 2000s, and really took off in the late 2000s, early 2010s, and now it has spread like wildfire.
Hey,
Um,
could I interject for a moment before you get
yes.
into podcasting? Could you give them the history of how the internet got started, so they'll know how, even though we enjoy the benefits of this media, because we see where Elon Musk is trying to shut it down. If you would just tell the audience how it started, because it was never started for us to do what we're doing now. So, if you would share that with them.
Okay. So the internet um, actually got started in 1971, and there was this. Hold up, let me find it on the rest of my notes right quick. Um, um, actually, let me go. Actually, let me go back further. Um, the beginning of the internet became actually started in 1969 with what is now known as ARPANET. It connected four university computers to each other, and they would communicate through those computers. But in the form that we now know it, it actually started in 1971. um, there was a there was a there was a program started called MDDS, and it was basically uh, like a, I don't want to say, well, technically, it was a means of collecting data from people. And so the NSA and the FBI basically used this information to collect data, and also as it advanced, they started getting grants and funding to kind of share data, not just collect data. And so uh, uh, this is how things like transmission control protocol started, internet protocol started, which is the beginning of IP addresses and TPC addresses that were developed by what we would now call um, web developers, or people who um, develop programs on what we now know as the World Wide Web, which was launched officially in 1991. Um,
So, are you saying that it took 20 years for the NSA and the FBI to get whatever their pet project was off the ground? Because we as citizens have to ask the question, why is the NSA and the FBI collecting data on regular citizens? Or who were they collecting data on? I'll put it like that. Just a question
very,
for
very,
the audience.
very good question.
Why is the FBI, why is the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the National Security and Administration, why are they collecting information? And I remember this is after uh, World War II, and this is also during the time that now what we call the Cold War, they are spying on each other. That's
Now,
I just want to drop that in there. That's all.
now, the network version of the internet was the network version that, called the ARPANET, that we talked about earlier, as far as networking computers together, was started by JCR Licklider. But the internet that we know as a public, as a worldwide web network, was started by Philip Amiagwali, and he worked at the Los Alamos National Laboratory in New Mexico.
So, are you talking about the same New Mexico where what's it, Rockwell is?
Roswell.
I'm sorry, Roswell, where the
Yes.
United States have been doing, and that was where was it the Manhattan Project?
To my Area 51.
I'm talking about the Manhattan Project. You can call it Area 51 of what you know,
Uh,
but yes.
I think the Manhattan Project was uh
Well, they
in
did go ahead, but
I thought.
they did different parts in different because they
Okay,
did
yeah, yeah, yeah.
different areas of the country. Um,
Oak Ridge,
so
Tennessee.
yes, but but my point is we still talking about the same New Mexico because a lot of things go on in the desert of New Mexico that has to do
Absolutely.
with government top
White
secret stuff.
White Sands missile ranges there.
Okay.
Uh, White Sands, New Mexico, which is not far from uh, Roswell, Area 51, Los Alamos. They're all within. I want to say they're all within. It's not very. They're not very far from each other, but there is a little bit of distance in between, due to the things that they're doing.
Okay, and the point I was making is this person you just named, whoever he is, who developed this program, and you said he was working for who?
He was working for the Los Alamos National Laboratory.
Okay, so you're talking about, is that a private laboratory?
It is a military laboratory. Yes.
Oh, so you have the military and the federal government and the NSA. And the NSA a part of the, is that's a part of the, what is that? NSA, is that part of the military?
It's not part of the military, but it is tied to the Department of Homeland Security.
Okay, but there was no Homeland Security at that time. So I need to know what NSA was back in 19. Is it a part of the CIA then?
Um, I think they kind of act independently, but do work with each other.
Okay, so we're talking about secret governments, or as Donald Trump has called them, the deep state, because we do have quote unquote deep state, and these people do work, as you said, they work independent, but at the same time, these people also don't report to anybody. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Oh, okay. Our audience need to understand this, that all of these three-letter organizations that occupy space that they call the government of the United States, unless we do our own research, we don't know how much these people are operating really against public interest.
And can I piggyback on what you just said?
Sure.
Um, there is a movie that starred Will Smith and Gene Hackman called Enemy of the State. And this was the first movie that I can remember where you kind of had a movie that emphasized, you know, the NSA and different things like this, and how they literally manipulated a situation to the character that Will Smith was playing, and the government and the person that was in charge of the NSA in the movie literally set the thing up to come after Will Smith's character, and then Will Smith ended up bumping into a guy who formerly worked with the NSA, and this guy literally helped Will Smith flip the NSA on itself and get paid at the same time.
Okay, but part of that movie also, which I found very scary, because I think I remember this same movie, because there were also people who were running rogue operations.
Yes.
Okay,
Now,
and that's the scary part, because you got all kinds of actors who do different things, and we don't want to get too far off of the subject matter,
right.
because what we're talking about is how it's messaged and how we get manipulated, and we can go down rabbit holes. But as we can see, we almost 40 minutes into this, and if you would just go bring us up to the Facebook and the MySpace and all of those, how starting in 1969, we're talking about different things that really the government was doing, but now it's being sold to us as if they wanted everybody to have access, when in actuality, they wanted everybody's information. And I hope we don't forget that, because what they were doing was collecting information. So, if you would keep going. Hello? Hello?
Yes. Hello.
Did your mic die? I'm saying
I don't
keep.
know.
Okay, just keep going. From the Facebook. If you got the not the Facebook, the MySpace, all the way up.
Okay. Um, actually, so doing my research, and I can actually kind of dipped into I actually found out about social media my freshman year of college. And the first website that I ended up going on, before I actually knew in depth about social media was Black Planet. And basically, it was literally where black people would reach out to each other, and you had to be in high school to even get on. So you had to have like your high school email address, uh, or you just had to have an email address. You had to be at least 16. So I was in college, and I was just talking to people from all over the place. Then there was College Club, and the two that I was on was College Club and Black Planet up until I transferred schools in 2004, and then I found out about Facebook, and it was invitation only, and you had to have a college email address.
Okay, so you're
And
saying Facebook did not start out the way it's going now?
yes, it did not start out the way it's
Okay,
going now.
okay, but you said Facebook, but there was a MySpace before there were Facebook. That's why I said do the do the because computers used to have interface and you did emails before they actually connected you to the internet. When the internet you had access to browsers, and browsers access you to what you now call MySpace. And MySpace started out as something else. In other words, they're building the web is showing you how to actually do various things on it. In other words, you can have it for a specific purpose, because YouTube did not start out being what it is now. YouTube started out being a what is it, DIY type thing, and most of the people who were on YouTube, they used it to promote hateful messaging because they had been run out of other spaces. So we are seeing how it has interfaced and morphed into so many different things now that originally that wasn't the goal. So, uh, um, what's the difference between the Google and the YouTube, and how they interface, and how are they manipulating us?
Okay, Google was literally started as a search engine. You type in the subject, and then it just pulls up everything related to that subject. YouTube was more of videos on how to explain different stuff, and then it came to music artists posting videos and different things, of their music, and then it just blew up from there. And then people just started making videos, and then around the mid to late 2000s, then it became about putting content on, and then there was the emergence of internet comedians, and uh uh became the age of influencers around the 2013-ish era, and now it's a whole nother thing on its own now.
So, when did Twitter when was Twitter introduced?
Twitter launched in 2006.
Okay, and what
uh
about Instagram, and the difference between those two?
okay, Instagram came about in 2012. I'm sorry. uh yeah, it came about 2010. Twitter came out 2006. The difference between Twitter and Instagram started off as a photo and video sharing network site. Twitter was was a short character messaging site. Basically, your messages that you send on Twitter, you have 140 characters to get a message out, and you contacted people and networked with people via short message.
and this may be trivial to people who are actually listening to us because they have these and they do it every day. But the whole concept is how we have fallen into this trap in thinking that all of these social medias were really meant for us, when in essence, they weren't, and they're not. That is the reason why you see Elon Musk and uh, Mark Zuckerberg. Mark Zuckerberg just went before Congress and pretended that he was coerced into uh, manipulating people or uh, to um, flag people on his platform about COVID. And we know from doing research that back in 2016, people internationally was using Facebook to control the messaging of who was going to win the presidential election. And if you guys will do your own research, you will find that out there. You also find out that Ukraine has been controlled by Neuralink because the government give Elon Musk a whole lot of money to mess over, and he continues to mess over, while at the same time he keeps pretending that he's some type of super guru who knows stuff, but in essence, he's a puppet for the government because he's a useful government tool. And the governments continue to not only control Musk and all of these people who they will give them billions because they can control the masses. But at the same time, they will talk about people like the man that's in China or Russia or North Korea to say they're the bad people, they're the boogeymen. And we have to learn to know that we have to use these instruments to develop something for ourselves. So eventually in the future, we will have our own, not just a platform, but the way to run a platform. We have to do that because if it's run by the government, if it's set up by the government, then we will run into another WikiLeaks. We'll run into another Edward Snowden. They didn't. These people still alive, and they outed governments, and governments did not like that. So even though they may not be in the public face in places right now, the things that are going on with our governments are still happening, and they're still trying to manipulate us. That's the reason why the government did not want TikTok to be in the United States. Of course, they tried to force them to do certain things and disown certain things and went before Congress. But more young people love TikTok because they have the freedom to do what they need to do and do it faster because that's a product that's not owned by the United States. And that is the reason for this podcast tonight, because there are all forms of media, but media is for propaganda purposes. And the messaging has been abused by all kinds of actors. And the only way we can figure out what we need to do to be helpful for ourselves is to go and find the information. As what I read to you earlier tonight. If it wasn't for the internet, I couldn't have found as much information that I gave you guys in the amount of time that I gave you because it does serve a purpose for us. But we need to be quite aware of how much of the information that we have access to may or may not be accessible to us in the future. So while we have the opportunity, it is it is incumbent of us that we make good use of it to connect with as many people as we possibly can to do what we're trying to do to free ourselves from this regime we call imperialism, colonization globally, because we have been colonized globally, and that's why it's taken us so long in the melanated community regardless if you in Indonesia, Southeast Asia, India, or on the continent, or in the Caribbean, or in the United States. We have been colonized, and it's time for us to make some different moves, but we have to make different moves in a different manner. And some of it is not going to be online, if you get what I'm saying. We can educate each other, but certain things that we need to talk about, we need to find other avenues. So I will challenge you guys, if you can think of other ways of communicating with each other and with us, shoot us an email. Tell us about people who are doing some things different, who are trying to come up with new technology. We are the people who've been creative anyways. And now it's time for us to be creative to move ourselves forward instead of continue pad the pockets of those who continue to hold us hostage and hold us in an oppressive state. And unless Mr. Chocolate has more to share with you guys this evening, that's all I have for you. And I hope you guys have a good evening and continue to tune in and continue to help us to grow the channel. Grow this podcast. I turn it back over to Mr. Chocolate.
All right. Disclaimer, we are not pushing any religious beliefs or denominations and or political affiliations. We are podcasting to promote cultural and historical education, critical thinking, and free thought. If you would like to have any comments or questions, please send them to the chat or email the show at therealchocolatelife@gmail.com. Please like, share, and follow The Chocolate Life on any of the following podcasting platforms: Spotify, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, Red Circle, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, Pandora, Player FM, Jam, Afropods, Zencaster, Listen Notes, Podcast Addicts, Podchaser, Buzzsprout, Podcast Republic, RSS.com, Spreaker, Podcast Guru, Overcast, and many other platforms that are coming. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend. I hope you take this information and just add it and try to apply it. Stay vigilant, stay visual, stay ready so you don't have to get ready. And until next time, I will talk to you later. This is Mr. Chocolate, and this was The Chocolate Life. Peace out.